When we think of early American colonization, many of us think of British settlements. But the Spanish began colonizing the Americas back in 1493, long before the English arrived in 1607. Christopher Columbus, sailing for Spain, arrived on an island called Guanahani in 1492, now part of the Bahamas. However, it wasn't until Columbus's second voyage in 1493 that the first permanent Spanish settlement, Isabela on the island of Hispaniola, was founded in the New World. Hispaniola is now an island split between the countries of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Columbus voyaged to Central and South America many times, but he never made it to the contiguous US. We can think about Spain's motivations for colonization using the phrase gold, glory, and God. In other words, the pursuit of material wealth to improve the position of the crown and the expansion of Christianity, specifically Spanish Catholicism. Spanish conquistadors crossed the Caribbean islands to Central America and continued into South America and North America. This era of colonization by the Spanish was characterized by violence, religion, and exploitation. One conquistador, Bernal Diaz del Castillo, was even reported as saying, "We came to serve God and to get rich, as all men wish to do." Yeah, cool story, bro. The English and the Spanish had some shared purposes, finding wealth for settlers and the crown and spreading Christianity, but different styles of colonization and different emphases. They also arrived in different landscapes and met indigenous populations that differed greatly. Those indigenous populations, in turn, had constant difficult decisions to make as their homes were invaded not only by strange people, but by animals and plants they'd never seen. They, far more than the invaders, also fell prey to devastating diseases that decimated their populations. I'm Dr. Danielle Bainbridge, and this is Study Hall, U.S. History to 1865. According to a 2019 study at Quaternary Science Reviews, in the first century after Columbus's initial arrival in the Americas, the native population went from over 60 million to around 6 million. Between disease, violence, and violations of their culture, including loss of land, the indigenous population was devastated. Much of what is now known as Mexico and its surrounding areas was, until the early 16th century, the Aztec Empire. Hernan Cortez and his conquistadors arrived on the coast in what is now known as Veracruz in 1519. Cortez and his men worked their way across the vast Aztec Empire while allying with powerful cities who disliked the Aztecs. The Spaniards were impressed with the sophisticated agricultural techniques that the Aztecs employed and astounded by the elaborate temples where ritual human sacrifice was practiced. They were initially welcomed by Moctezuma II, the Aztec emperor, but after a short time, the natives began falling prey to European diseases like smallpox. Tension soon emerged, and in May 1520, while Cortez was away, the Spanish and their native allies massacred unknown numbers of Aztecs celebrating a festival. Cortez quickly returned to establish order, but he was losing control of the city, and sometime around June 29th, Moctezuma died under unclear circumstances. The next night, the Aztecs drove out Cortez and his army from Tenochtitlan. Roughly 600 of Cortez's conquistadors and 3,000 of the indigenous army they had rallied were either killed or captured in a 24-hour span. This became known as the Night of Tears. Nonetheless, by 1521, Cortez and his army had turned the tide, and Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City, lay in ruins as the Spanish began to build an empire. Many tribes indigenous to the area quickly discovered that the Spanish were even more harsh imperialists than the Aztecs. The Spanish forced Catholic conversion, enslaved the natives, and employed a system called encomiendas, which combined the two. Spaniards claimed possession of vast tracts of land. But who would work this land? Spaniards did not envision a family farm model, and disease had destroyed the indigenous populations whom they initially planned to exploit. This is when the histories of Africa, Europe, and the Americas tragically united, and Europeans purchased enslaved Africans, transported them across the ocean, and put them to work in lands shockingly depopulated of indigenous peoples. The Spaniards introduced domesticated animals from Europe to the land, as well as crops such as sugarcane. Conquistador Pedro Menendez de Aviles established St. Augustine in Florida in September 1565, now the oldest European city in the continental United States. By this point, the Spanish had been taking any raw materials of value and sending them back to Europe for decades. Ships full of gold, emeralds, tobacco, and more returned to Spain, motivating more Europeans to come across the ocean and claim their share of riches. The Spanish conquest continued west and then north into what is now New Mexico. Meanwhile, on the eastern coast of North America, the English were now coming. The colony of Roanoke was founded in 1585, but by 1590 it had disappeared. Historians debate the reason for this to this day. The first permanent British colony in America, Jamestown, was founded in 1607, roughly the same time as the Spanish founded Santa Fe. By the fall of 1609, there were 500 settlers in the colony. Only 60 of them made it through the winter. The Virginia colonists struggled economically, with basically every money-making scheme a failure. A colonist named John Rolfe brought seeds with him for a new cash crop: tobacco. But Jamestown needed labor, and the ominous solution to this problem came in 1619 when Rolfe noticed a Dutch man of war entering the Chesapeake Bay carrying a group of captive Africans. By the end of the 17th century, enslaved African labor became the economic foundation for the colonies. The atrocities inflicted upon the enslaved Africans cannot be understated. Many did not survive the trip across the ocean, many more were worked to death once they got to the colonies, and they were forcibly bred to generate more enslaved labor. Over roughly 3 centuries of the Atlantic slave trade, approximately 12.5 million Africans were shipped from their homeland to the New World. About 10.7 million arrived in the Americas. The slave trade cost the most human lives of any long-distance global migration. English explorers slowly began exploring the northern part of the eastern seaboard, and in 1620, the colony was founded by a group eventually known as Pilgrims. While the Spanish colonies and conquest were sponsored by the crown, the English had royal charters, wherein the people would assume all the risks and reap all the benefits, minus some taxes, of course. And in 1681, the colony of Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn. Unlike Plymouth, this colony mostly held to the idea of true religious freedom, and while slavery was not immediately outlawed in the colony, it was rare to see slavery practiced within its borders. And relations with native groups were also generally less hostile in Pennsylvania than in other colonies, at least in the early days. However, conflicts between the English and the indigenous peoples of America did exist, particularly in the Virginia settlements. The paramount chief of the land, Powhatan, was the leader of an alliance of natives which encompassed many small tribes. His younger brother, Opechancanough, led attacks against the colonists in 1622 and 1644, resulting in hundreds of deaths on both sides. Though the English colonies may have initially seemed less threatening to the natives than the Spanish, their presence was no less devastating, and we'll talk about the continued impact of the British in our next episode. Thanks for watching Study Hall U.S. History to 1865, which is part of the Study Hall Project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you like this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can learn more about Study Hall and the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time.